Mark, what is this?
What?
This.
It's called a cease and desist letter. What were their names?
Who?
The girls.
When did you get this?
About 10 days ago, right after we launched the site.
Jesus Christ.
Hey, the girls. What were their
They're
names?
saying the Winklevoss twins are saying that you stole their idea.
I find that to be a little more than mildly annoying.
Oh, well, they find it to be intellectual property theft. Look, why didn't you show this to me?
It was addressed to me.
They're saying that we stole the Facebook from Divya Narendra and the Winklevoss.
I know what it says.
Did we?
Did we what?
Don't screw around with me now. Look at me. The letter says we could face legal action.
No, it says I could face legal action.
This is from a lawyer, Mark. They must feel they have some grounds.
The lawyer is their father's house counsel.
Do they have grounds?
The grounds are our thing is cool and popular and Harvard Connection is lame. Wardo, I didn't use any of their code. I promise. I didn't use anything. Look, a guy who built a nice chair doesn't owe money to everyone who ever has built a chair, okay? They came to me with an idea. I had a better one.
Why didn't you show me this letter?
I didn't think it was a big deal.
Welcome everyone to the Twice Over. I'm Faraz. Today I'm with Yusuf and Fahad.
What's up, Faraz?
What's up, guys?
What up, guys? All right, so today we're discussing The Social Network, a David Fincher film from 2010. And this is kind of special that this is the first episode we're doing with three of us recording. And it's because we had Fahad select this movie for Yusuf to watch. So Fahad, I'm going to drop it off to you right now and explain why you wanted Yusuf particularly to watch this movie.
Yes, Faraz. What about this movie? What about this movie made you pick for me specifically? And don't tell me it was because I made that crack about Mark Zuckerberg being in The Village earlier.
No, I thought it was time for us to review a David Fincher movie. His movies always have this unique style of like giving us information, and I thought this movie. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this movie. Just yeah.
Was it because it's a lawsuit and I'm a lawyer? Is that the other reason?
No, that actually didn't come to mind. But I do want to hear your take on like how they depicted those boardroom scenes.
Okay, fair enough.
The depositions.
Yeah.
I mean, not a bad choice for a movie, and not suggesting that. I'm just joking around, but yeah, it was. I was happy to see this movie on your selection list. So, definitely worthy of the review, as you said. When did you see this movie initially?
So I've always seen scenes of this movie. I never actually watched it all the way through until just last night. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so you picked it without actually having watched it, like from the first minute to the last minute before actually telling me to watch it.
Right. I've seen parts of the movie in segments, never actually watching it all the way through. So yeah.
Hey Yusuf, you have to clear my memory here because I was telling Fahad earlier that I remember watching this movie at U of I, like in undergrad, with people going to the movie theater when it came out. Am I wrong in remembering this, or was this like another crew I watched this with?
I mean, as far as you constantly remind us, you only have one crew, and that crew happens to be everyone you know. So I don't know what other crew you're talking about right now, but I do recall seeing this movie pretty much right when it came out.
Yeah, it came out fall of my first semester at U of I.
The fact it came out in 2010, and that is very surprising to me now. I mean, that seems very early in the life of Facebook to my recollection compared to when this movie came. I remember seeing this movie like when almost after Facebook was like fully established, but like I didn't get on Facebook till like 2007-ish, something like that. So like it was only a few years after that this this biography of Mark Zuckerberg, if you can call it a biography, was kind of presented to the entire world. I guess my recollection of when it came out is a little bit off, but I did think that was interesting. I mean, while this company that's now basically a superpower, it was forming and kind of developing its base, a movie is coming out about the founder and he's not involved in the making of that movie at all. Is that common? I mean, to me, that doesn't seem like a very common thing that happens. I see it.
It's not common. Usually movies are made about people well after their contribution to the world has like
right.
It's been recorded in history, right? So we have some sort of perspective on the historical contributions or
It's more like a biopic, right? Like Malcolm X or Steve Jobs. I don't know.
Yeah, the one time you see this kind of thing, and not even quite the same, but like there's been several movies about presidents, for example, W, if you'll recall.
Right.
But even that was like after his presidency. This is while he's still kind of in the prime of his career, or
Not even
the
the
thing that
prime.
made him famous.
I would say it's still like a budding like entrepreneur. Like I don't know.
Yeah, because if you see where Facebook ended up,
Yeah,
I mean,
it still had a ways to go.
right. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Just kind of, it was a unique perspective that we don't really usually get about, just things involved in pop culture or whatever. So that was something different
So
about this
do you
movie.
think now that you've rewatched it in 2020 that there's something else to add to this movie with that perspective?
I think I did at least have a very different takeaway from watching the movie this time around than I did when I first
Okay.
saw it. Maybe that's partially just like naivete. What did you think, Faraz? I think that the first time I watched it, I didn't question a lot of the characterization of Mark Zuckerberg, and this time around I found myself doing that constantly. Like they were trying to spoon feed me exactly what type of person Mark Zuckerberg was, and this time I wasn't as willing to accept it. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
I don't know if it's a difference in my personality over the last decade, but I remember being more sympathetic to him when I first watched this movie than I was this time. And it's
Okay,
also
so the
probably based
opposite.
on the fact of like, what he's become in the last decade, right? Because he's just way more powerful than he ever was at that time. And in my opinion, he's made some decisions that are questionable at best, or like mischievous at worst. So like this time around, I was a lot more, I don't know, he became the villain pretty easily for me in the movie.
Well, yeah, I think the movie does lend itself to that type of interpretation that you're mentioning, right? That he's kind of got a couple things up his sleeve and is not being totally, forthcoming with the people he's having business dealings with. So
I found myself rooting for the Winklewosses and Eduardo so much more.
I was gonna say maybe it was the difference between like me being in business school back then and like a sheep.
you don't consider yourself I like that term, the sheep, but you don't consider yourself a sheep anymore then?
I definitely don't adhere to the values or some of the things I learned back then. I definitely don't.
We're getting way too political here. Let's just let's get into our scores here a
All
little
right,
bit.
I'll
So
get that started. I'll start with the writing. I thought the writing was clever. Oh no, we're just gonna go with our scores, right? Because we don't want to. If we all agree, we'll just
Yeah.
quickly discuss and move
Yeah.
on. I gave it a 75.
Wow.
okay, I give it an 85, so a little bit above you.
And I gave it a 95.
Wow.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I do think writing was kind of one of the stronger suits in this movie. I didn't love every bit of it, but I did think a lot of it came down to. I mean, we're talking about it's a character study on Mark Zuckerberg, right? In my opinion, and so a lot of that comes from how he interacts with, particularly I think with Eduardo Saverin, his co-founder, but also Erica Albright. I thought was very important. She's only she's not really a main character, but she comes up a couple times, and I think when she does come up, those scenes are really telling. So I really liked their dialogue. So that's kind of what I base my score on.
So the high score for me was I thought the writing was the highlight of the movie. This screenplay by Aaron Sorkin was good. I've seen a lot of his signature shows, and there's something very unique about his style of dialogue. It's always very unnaturalistic, but it's full of information, which I thought was a perfect fit for this movie. Because this movie was seeking to describe the environment in which Facebook was founded, and it was very information based.
So I was gonna say I was thinking an 80 initially for the score, but then I reduced it down to a 75 mainly because of a couple of scenes. The conversations that he had with his lawyer, played by Rashida Jones, like those felt like so forced, and it's there to give us insight on how Mark was feeling after the fact about how things went down, but like it felt so forced that I brought it down to 75, which I mean I still think is pretty decent. I just didn't like it as much as you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where you're coming from. There were some scenes that just did not feel right to me, or they just did not feel natural. But there are also scenes that I thought were like like Fahad said, packed with information, and they're really well portrayed. So I think that is what I took away from the movie, was the writing was really what I was focused on. But
Have you guys watched many Aaron Sorkin shows? Like what's Newsroom is one of the more recent ones.
The West Wing as well.
The West Wing, right? So the writing styles, they're always very sharp-witted and just very unnaturalistic, right? The characters go on monologues.
Yeah, so that's one thing I wrote down. I wrote that it's very clever, concise, and short, like the dialogue was.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's character is portrayed as that kind of guy, right? He's just like, he's always just taking little jabs. He's not afraid to kind of twist the knife very quickly, you know? And I did enjoy kind of the little, you know, shots he takes at people here and there. I mean, he's more or less portrayed as a jerk, right? But I did enjoy kind of that. There was a lot of humor there. Yeah, there was a lot to get out of the writing here, I thought. But
I found it nice that like the little jabs that Mark was throwing out, it was always from a place of insecurity, and you could see it on his face. Like he'd say something, and then he'd instantly regret it.
All right, so let's talk about the next one, narrative. I gave it an 85.
I gave it a 75.
I'm super low on this one. I gave it a 65 on narrative.
Okay, we're kind of opposite here.
Okay, so we're just reversed, I guess. All right, nice. I mean, what did you like about the narrative?
I mean, I liked it the most, clearly, out of all of you. I thought it was a fascinating story. It's a biopic, right? I felt engaged throughout, and like I wanted to see how things would play out, despite already knowing how things play out, and like what happens with Facebook and all of that. So if it was able to do that to me, that means I enjoyed the narrative quite a bit. Like, as in, I thought the pace was strong. The direction was great. I thought David Fincher did a great job, and the audience connection may not be that strong, but I thought the story was enjoyable.
Okay, for me, I thought the subject matter was already so interesting. I didn't think the movie's narrative thrust was that great. So for the movie to be engaging, right, it's got to have something's got to be on the line. In this movie, all that was ever on the line was mostly the friendships and not really the money, although the money was a motivating factor for other characters. But to Mark, the central character, money wasn't that big of a deal. So all that was on the line in this movie was friendships.
I think what was missing for me was that there is not a lot of like character development in this movie. I feel like Mark is who he is, and we find out who that person is, but like nothing really
Changes?
affects or develops about him. So you know, it wasn't strong in terms of narrative. And I also do think, do you guys think this movie is that interesting in terms of its story if it weren't for the fact that, you know, Facebook was this big, you know, entity,
right,
you know, in the social media realm? And, you know,
if Facebook wasn't a big company, it wouldn't be a compelling movie to watch. Not for me, at least.
Yeah, let's just say it was about a made up social media company. Like they just, you know, it wasn't Facebook, it was something else. I'm not sure that it would be as interesting. So I kept questioning that as well. That it's like Facebook's footprint on the world is kind of what is making me so interesting in what's going on. But if you peel that back, I mean, what really is happening on screen? Is it really that compelling? To me, the answer was no, not really. And that's okay. There was other things that I enjoyed about the movie, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't hinged on the actual development of the plot or anything like that.
So I wanted to get back to what you were saying about the characters, the character development. So I thought the movie was taking like a quick snapshot of like the time and place, and it didn't go through enough of a time where you could see any development in the characters. Yusuf, do you flaw the movie for not taking that time to develop the characters, despite like the timeline not moving that much?
Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, really the movie is a snapshot, right? Because we're seeing everything through the lens of, you know, these hearings that are going on as part of a lawsuit, or two lawsuits actually. So I mean, we are kind of seeing everything in that one moment, and we're seeing recollections from that point. But really, yeah, I don't know. I guess I did kind of you know, take issue with that. I mean, at the end of the day, what they're trying to convey is that, you know, sometimes people don't change, I guess, but that's just something that I didn't find as compelling about the story. But I mean, it's a legitimate story to tell, so you know, I do get that point of it too.
Generally speaking, Yusuf's making a pretty good point, making me reconsider my really high score. The idea that, yeah, if it wasn't Facebook, like how good of a like narrative would this be, really?
Yeah, I mean, because for us, like, I do definitely think that I was interested in all the little plot developments, but I think I was only interested because I'm seeing like, oh, like there's a couple other characters that come into the movie that are like names that we know, again, from pop culture and things like that. And
Yeah.
I'm interested because I'm seeing the interaction of these, these companies or these entities that I know of, that, I grew up on, basically, that were, part of our adolescence, essentially. So I'm not sure how much that was influencing, but I do feel that was there. So, and then, also like, well, we can talk about this in more detail later, but I did feel like kind of the motivations in the end were a little bit simplifying to me. So that's kind of where I knocked it. But
Well said. We'll move on to the acting score. For me, it was a 70.
I've got it at a 75. So
And I've got it at 75. So yeah, we're all close.
very nice. I think Jesse Eisenberg did a pretty good job playing the character he was asked to play. Again, I kind of wonder about how accurate of a portrayal that is, given that Mark Zuckerberg wasn't involved at all. I think he took issue with this movie. I think I've read that before, that, and no surprise, he didn't like the way that Mark Zuckerberg was portrayed. But he plays essentially this, like, emotionally aloof genius, you could say, who's, he's kind of a jerk, but, he also does show that there's like some emotion there, but he's not very good at displaying that emotion. I thought Jesse Eisenberg did a really good job of that.
Like Fahad said, it's like from a place of insecurity, and it kind of makes that very clear and obvious.
The jabs he takes, yeah.
Yeah, you can tell that like he's not doing it just to be mean, as much as it might seem like that to the characters around him. So I like that about it. Did you guys notice that? I found it distracting, actually. This is not a knock on Andrew Garfield because he was asked to play the role, but he plays a Hispanic guy, and he's like clearly not Hispanic, and that would be fine if like the movie didn't harp on his race so much. Like they talk about several times, I think I just got invited into this club because it's a diversity thing, and like, they mentioned that like multiple times about his diversity.
So I looked it up. Eduardo is a Brazilian dude
Interesting, yeah.
of European descent.
Yeah, maybe that might change my perspective a little bit, just because like,
I mean, dude, I looked him up, man. He's white as hell.
yeah, like he's okay, so maybe that's better off. But I just didn't like how they were playing on his diversity that much, and like it didn't fit. But maybe that's just my my knowledge gap here on that. So and anyway, that's not a knock on him, because if anything, that's the casting's fault. I think he did a fine job playing that role.
Yeah, I thought his acting was really good. I thought out of the two, versus Jesse Eisenberg, I thought his acting was a little bit better. For me, Jesse Eisenberg, I usually dislike his performances, but I thought this role was made for him, and he was good here.
For me, well, I was going to say the only reason I gave it a 70 and not lower is because of Jesse Eisenberg and Andrew Garfield. Otherwise, like, I didn't think anyone really stood out in any way, and I would have probably given it a lesser score. But
Justin Timberlake's acting wasn't good here.
I was gonna ask, is this his first big movie? Because I don't know if I had seen anything with him before this.
Wasn't it?
So what other movies has he
Just in
done?
Time
I mean,
or
I know he's
something?
in that movie about time.
Yeah.
Is that the one? No,
Something
that's
about
not
time, right?
Yeah. The one where like time is a currency,
Yeah.
right? We should probably know what that movie's called. But or is it just called Time? In Time. There we go. So yeah, I think this would predate that. So I was about to ask the same question. I mean, what did you guys think of JT in this movie? It was distracting to me for sure.
It was distracting me too. It was cringy in some scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Cringy is the right word for it. I didn't think it fit really that
He's
well.
supposed to play like this one guy who Mark can, who understands Mark, and that is kind of the same as him. But really, first of all, I don't think the portrayal was in any way kind of similar to Mark Zuckerberg. But also on top of that, like, I just couldn't get over the fact that it was Justin Timberlake. Like, I'm never going to be able to separate that. So him playing like this like outcast computer genius just was not working for me. And he didn't make up for it with his acting necessarily either. It was fun to see him on screen, I guess. But I honestly did enjoy those scenes, but it wasn't because of his acting or anything.
All right. Aesthetics next, guys. I gave this an 80.
I gave it an 82.
I'm at a 70. What'd you guys like about this movie in terms of aesthetics?
I thought the choices of shooting mostly interior and night scenes was interesting. Early on in the movie, when the Facebook's being founded, you see all these scenes in his apartment and nighttime scenes, and I thought it added to the atmosphere of like kind of describing like the college life in which the Facebook was founded in.
I liked it mainly because a lot of this movie is conversations, right? And we're sitting in these conversations and we're in the middle of them rather than like watching them. I don't know. I think was this the every frame a painting video about Fincher? I actually didn't watch it this time that you sent it, Fad. I mean, I've seen it a while ago, but I think it's the one where he talks about how he kind of puts you in the conversation.
Oh,
And,
right.
like,
And
it
it
just
mirrors
switches back
the
and forth.
movement of the
Like,
characters,
you're,
right?
you're literally in the middle physically of the conversation. Like the camera's placed in the middle of the
Yeah, so you feel
of the
like you're in
people
the room
talking.
with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought like considering how heavily it relies on like those deposition scenes, and it just made me feel like, all right, this is very immersive, and I enjoyed that.
I can definitely see that. Those deposition scenes, you're pretty much like, it's like you're sitting in the center of the table and swiveling around to as the two sides are interacting. So yeah, I that's something I didn't really think about, but that was pretty immersive, I think. I'll also add that the score of this movie was pretty, it's really subtle and nice, I think. I think it won for original score. Over Inception, in fact. I remember being pretty mad about that and wondering why.
Really?
Because, yeah,
Wow.
like, I mean, I was just like, what? Hans Zimmer killed it, blah, blah, blah.
I didn't
But
even notice the score of this movie.
it's mostly, it's piano centric, and it is kind of mellow. It's kind of sad, but it's also a little bit dark at moments. I think that really does fit kind of with the character we're watching. So it was a nice backdrop for that. And like you said, there's also a lot of like these shots of like, old Grand Harvard or whatever, and you can kind of see the college life, but everyone's kind of a little bit, they're dressed properly in their jackets and such. But then there's Mark Zuckerberg, who's in his, gray hoodie or whatever. So like those scenes did give me a good conveyance of how he doesn't exactly fit in, or he's trying to, get acceptance, which was central to the theme of this movie. So I liked that as well in how they arranged those shots.
All right, speaking of themes, this was my lowest score for the movie. I gave it a 50.
Wow. Right. I gave it a score of 70.
I'm at 55.
All right.
So Fahad, you tell us, what'd you see here?
I didn't see much, to be honest. I just gave it an average score. I thought there wasn't much going on in the background of the movie. Something that traditionally is considered theme, like friendship or something, that was actually the central plot of this movie. So there's not much to talk about. I just gave it an average score.
And because there's not much to talk about, that's why I gave it a 50. I just didn't think that there's anything to take away, really.
I think it actually takes several shots at like themes and doesn't develop any of them that well. So that's kind of why I landed where I landed. I mean, you can see that there's like jealousy and betrayal at play. There's like there's class differences between, a big part of Mark's insecurity is like his, wealth and status. And that comes up several times.
Belonging. He wants to be part of
Right,
that group.
acceptance as well, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
they're all kind of there, but, those are pretty basic themes in my eye. So I guess that's why I landed where I landed, and they don't really go far or tell us anything new about any of those things. Again, it's conveying what's going on in Mark Zuckerberg's mind, and we do get a sense of that, but they don't really tell us anything new about those things. They just tell us that those are the factors that are at play, kind of in this conflict that we're watching. So I did like how they were able to weave in kind of the money aspect to this whole thing. I mean, from the first scene, I think in that first conversation in the bar with Erica, one of the first things that Mark says is, the ability to make money impresses nobody, and that's immediately a shot at Eduardo, because Eduardo has money, he's made money on his own, and Mark doesn't see any value in that, while everyone else does, and everyone at Harvard does. So that kind of gives you a good sense of where his mind is at and what one of the driving factors is, and I think they played that throughout as well. I mean, every time money comes up, you can see how it affects his mindset. So I did like how they worked that in, and how important wealth was to a lot of what happened, and not necessarily in the traditional way, because he wasn't trying to make money in a lot of ways. So I thought that at least that aspect of it was interesting.
Yeah, I like that contrast you pointed out between the two characters, Eduardo and Mark. There was another major one between Mark and then the Winklevoss twins. the Winklevoss. I hope I'm
The
pronouncing that
Winklevi,
right.
as Zuckerberg would say.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Winklevi, they always seek to act in a stand-up manner, right? Their dealings are pretty straightforward, and that contrasts with Mark's. Shady
Yeah, the
stuff
gentlemen
that he
of
does.
Harvard, right?
Right. I found myself rooting for those guys more in this movie.
Yeah, I was surprised I was rooting for them too. Anyway, I guess that does it for the spoiler-free discussion, right, guys?
Yeah.
I think so. We will see you all on the other side of the jump.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you haven't already, subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcast, and remember to support us on Patreon or by sharing the podcast with a friend. Feel free to contact us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Twice Over, or email us at comments@thetwiceover.com. All of the music you heard is from Amerigo Gazaway. Check him out on Bandcamp and Spotify.